A young man wakes up in an unfamiliar place, confused and disoriented. He reflects on the events that led him here, remembering his death. In the empty environment, he encounters an imposing yet serene figure, who introduces herself as Elfurua, the goddess of plants. She observes that he has awakened and seems willing to guide him through this new reality. The young man, still dazed, seeks to understand his situation while the goddess tries to lead him. Elfurua asks the young man to calm down and follow her. As they walk, something extraordinary happens. The grass around them starts to move, and he notices the roots are alive, growing and organizing themselves in a magical way. Still surprised, he watches the transformation while Elfurua maintains her calm. Soon, the roots form a table and chairs, inviting him to sit for a more peaceful conversation. As the young man settles in, another figure appears, reprimanding Elfurua for altering the space without permission. This is Arlis, the god who oversees the earth. He shows a somewhat irritated attitude toward the situation. Elfurua, remaining calm, explains to the young man that they are in the divine realm, the place where the gods dwell. She reveals that it was she who asked Arlis to temporarily bring the young man here, making him even more curious about the reason behind this. Elfurua seriously reveals that the young man was brought to the divine realm because he has passed away. The statement leaves the young man in shock as he tries to process the information. The reality of his death starts to sink in, intensifying his confusion and emotion in the face of this impactful revelation. Elfurua explains that the young man worked hard to support his family, dedicating himself to his responsibilities. She recalls that, on a regular day, while returning home from work, he had a fatal accident. The memory returns to the young man's mind, bringing a mix of sadness and acceptance as he begins to remember the events that led to his fate. Arlis directly states that the young man is dead, explaining that, under normal circumstances, his soul would have vanished and transformed into something new. However, he reveals that he was instructed by Elfurua to wait before allowing this to happen. Confused, the young man asks why someone like him is of such interest. Elfurua, with enthusiasm, declares that she likes him, surprising the young man even more with her unexpected sincerity. Elfurua mentions an event from the past, reminding the young man that when he was a child, he repaired an old and decaying sanctuary. The young man seems confused at first, but soon recognizes the place, associating it with the sanctuary near his grandfather's house. Elfurua explains that the sanctuary was home to a god who cared for nature. She highlights that, thanks to the repairs he made, the sanctuary began receiving visitors again, restoring the faith that had been lost. The young man starts to clearly remember the positive impact he had, realizing the connection to that moment in his life. Elfurua reveals that since the moment the young man restored the sanctuary, she has been watching over him. She thanks him, saying that everything that has happened is thanks to his actions in the past. The young man, still a little bewildered, tries to process this new information. The young man recalls moments from his life, particularly one where he comforted a loved one who was suffering. He wonders why his life never improved, despite his efforts to care for his family and help others. This reflection leaves him with a sense of regret. Elfurua, sitting across from him, admits that, while he was alive, she couldn't do anything to ease his suffering, expressing her sorrow for not being able to intervene more meaningfully in his life. The young man reflects on his situation and rejects the idea of blaming the gods for his difficult life, acknowledging that it makes no sense to depend on them only in moments of convenience. He expresses this conclusion lightly and sincerely, showing an acceptance of his reality. Arlis observes the young man's attitude, while Elfurua, moved, reacts when her name is mentioned with admiration. The young man's wisdom and resilience impress the gods. Arlis comments that many people, especially Japanese, don't fully believe in the gods but tend to seek them only in times of need. He acknowledges this with some criticism but notes that now, with the young man's death, he can be useful in another way. Elfurua, filled with enthusiasm, explains that the young man can be reborn and live again in another world. She describes this new world as different from Earth, with distinct cultures and diverse races, beyond just humans. The young man listens, intrigued, beginning to understand the possibilities that lie ahead. Elfurua clarifies that, instead of a simple reincarnation, the process would be transmigration, where his soul would be transferred to another world. She explains that if the young man refuses the offer, his soul will completely disappear, and a new one will be formed in its place. However, she emphasizes that there's no guarantee that transmigration will make his new life better. Respecting his decision, she assures him that she won't force him to do anything, allowing him to choose whether he wants to rest in peace or accept the challenge of a new existence. Elfurua calmly asks the young man what he wishes to do, leaving the decision entirely in his hands. After a moment of silent reflection, he responds with determination, declaring that he will accept the opportunity. As he makes his decision, Elfurua silently expresses in her thoughts that this is a selfish desire of hers, but she seems hopeful about his choice. Elfurua gently holds the young man's hands and affirms that, precisely because he has faced so many hardships in his past life, she wants him to be free to live as he wishes in his next life. Her words touch the young man deeply, who, surprised and emotional, reacts with tears in his eyes. Feeling the sincerity and care behind her wish, the young man, overcome with emotion, wonders why he is crying. Elfurua, noticing his distress, comforts him gently, acknowledging that he has endured much pain in his life. With words of comfort, she praises him for doing the best he could as the eldest son, bearing heavy responsibilities. She wraps the young man in a comforting hug, providing a moment of relief and validation for him, who finally feels that his efforts were recognized. The young man is embraced warmly by Elfurua as he breaks down in tears, finally letting go of all the weight and pain accumulated from his past life. Images of happy moments and important people from his past flash in his mind, contrasting with the intense emotion of the present. The comfort offered by the goddess seems to heal his emotional wounds, giving him a rare moment of vulnerability and acceptance. The young man, still emotional, apologizes for losing control of his feelings, but Arliss reassures him, telling him not to worry. Refocusing, he asks the young man what his decision will be. Determined, the young man firmly declares that he wants to be transmigrated, requesting to receive this opportunity. Arliss, pleased with his conviction, accepts the request with a simple "very well," while Elfurua watches the scene with a look of joy and hope for the young man's future. With the decision for transmigration made, Elfurua asks the young man what kind of life he would like to live in the other world, offering help to make it possible. He reflects and shares his desire to live a peaceful life in the countryside, surrounded by nature, as it was in his old home. He imagines an ideal life full of simplicity and harmony with the environment. Arliss comments that this type of wish falls within the domain of Elfurua, the goddess of nature, who eagerly agrees to help make the young man's dream come true. Elfurua announces that she will grant the young man her blessing, preparing him for his new life in the other world. A divine light emanates from her hands, surrounding him in a celestial glow. Arliss explains that the blessing of the goddess of plants is ideal for cultivating crops, ensuring that he will never need to worry about hunger. The young man watches in awe as the energy of the blessing flows into him, marking the beginning of his journey with a divine gift symbolizing care and sustenance. The young man looks at his hands and comments that he doesn't feel any immediate change after receiving the blessing. Elfurua reassures him, explaining that he will soon feel the effects, as his body will naturally adjust to the energy he received when he forms in the new world. She then hands him a staff, asking him to accept it. Intrigued, the young man asks about the object, looking at the staff, which seems to have special significance, while Elfurua prepares to explain its importance. Elfurua explains that the staff is a divine instrument created to help control the power of the blessing more efficiently. The staff can transform into any tool the young man desires, and it can adjust its size for ease of use and to avoid getting in the way. The young man experiments with the staff's abilities, amazed by its versatility and usefulness, recognizing that it will be a great help as he adapts to his new life. Arliss informs the young man that he has also granted him his blessing and that the time has come for the transmigration. He decides that a place abundant in nature would be the ideal destination, considering that overly busy areas would be uncomfortable and noisy. The young man, excited and with the staff in hand, prepares to begin his new journey, surrounded by the energy that signals the start of his transmigration. Hashira prepares for his transmigration, While Arliss and Elfurua offer him farewell words, they wish him to make the most of his new life and do his best in his next journey. Hashira, holding his staff and filled with gratitude, warmly thanks both of them for the gifts and the support he received. After the transmigration, Hashira wakes up in an unfamiliar environment, surrounded by trees and abundant nature. He looks around, confused about his location. As he gets up, he notices that his clothes have changed, adapting to the new world. Surprised, he concludes that he is in a forest, beginning to explore and orient himself in his new reality. Hashira confirms that he has been successfully transmigrated to the new world. He notices that his clothes have been adjusted to match the style of the farmers in that place, but he realizes that his body hasn't undergone significant changes. As he explores, he observes the immense trees and unfamiliar plants around him, marveling at the lush and peculiar vegetation of the area. Hashira looks at the landscape around him and realizes that, instead of the rural setting he had imagined, he is in a vast and dense forest. He reflects on the environment, noting how the nature around him is impressive and different from what he expected, creating a sense of admiration and challenge at the same time. Hashira starts to think about how difficult it would be to live in such an environment from the beginning. He feels a strange and powerful energy growing inside him, allowing him to clearly see what needs to be done. He realizes he can clear the land and build a house using the trees around him. With the staff in hand, he activates his ability, beginning the process of shaping the environment to create a livable space. Hashira begins to experiment with his newly discovered abilities and is amazed to realize that he can control the plants with precision, shaping them as he desires. He recognizes that this is the blessing of the goddess of plants, Elfurua, allowing him to manipulate nature in an extraordinary way. Using the staff, he remembers how Elfurua created chairs and tables, understanding that he can use this power to create and transform the environment around him. Hashira uses his abilities to quickly build a house, shaping it efficiently with the materials available in the forest. When he finishes, he looks at the result and notices that the house resembles his grandparents' home, where he spent happy moments in his childhood. Pleased with the work, he celebrates the fact that he completed the construction in such a short time. Feeling more confident in his new life, Hashira enters the house he just built and feels a wave of nostalgia as he realizes how much it resembles his grandparents' house. While exploring the interior, he notices that some details are still missing, like tatami mats on the floor. He reflects on the next steps, thinking about adding a kitchen and a bathroom, beginning to plan the necessary improvements to make the space more functional and comfortable. Hashira realizes that he needs water to complete his new home. He decides to explore the area around the newly built house to find a water source. Determined, he chooses a direction and sets off, showing his commitment to creating a self-sufficient, livable space. Hashira walks through the forest in search of water, amazed at the impact of the goddess of plants' blessing. He notices that even animal trails are easier to traverse, thanks to the influence of the blessing. As he carefully observes his surroundings, he analyzes the vegetation and the signs along the way, determined to find a water source that he can use for his new life. While exploring the forest, Hashira comes across unique plants and realizes he can understand their details and properties. Even though they're unfamiliar species, he identifies a few, like the aonoko, which can be delicious when young, and the tohihigo, whose red part of the stem is edible, but should be consumed in moderation. Satisfied, he gathers wild vegetables, commenting that he could never get something like this in the city, appreciating the natural resources available in his new life. Hashira finds a fruit called grave ringo, which grows only in that area, with a unique sweet-sour taste. When he tries it, he's amazed by how delicious it is, noticing that the juice is plentiful, perfect for quenching his thirst. Happy with the find, he decides to collect several fruits to take with him, enchanted by the richness of resources the new environment offers. Hashira continues his search for water while carrying the fruits he gathered. He hears the sound of running water from a distance and heads toward it, full of anticipation. Finally, he spots a water source, relieved to find such an essential resource for his new life. The discovery marks an important step in his adaptation to the environment. He reaches a large water source and marvels at the scene before him. Approaching it, He feels relieved to have found such a crucial resource for survival. Hashira observes the crystal-clear water and notices that the place is full of fish. He considers fishing but realizes he doesn't have the necessary tools, like a hook or line. Thinking about alternatives, he considers improvising something to replace the fishing line. While analyzing his options, something in the surroundings catches his attention, sparking his curiosity. Hashira notices something moving between the trees and hides to observe. He spots an animal that seems to be a deer, but with unusual characteristics, green fur and peculiar antlers. Surprised by the creature, he becomes curious about the unique fauna of this world, realizing more and more how different it is from what he knew in his past life. Hashira reflects on his food situation, satisfied with the vegetables and fruits, but feeling the need for meat. He observes that the peculiar animal seems herbivorous, which makes him consider the possibility of hunting it. Memories of his childhood arise when he heard stories of a neighbor who was a hunter and used traps to catch prey. Even so, Hashira acknowledges that he only learned the basics of hunting and meat preparation. Determined, he prepares to try something. Carefully considering how to proceed, Hashira attempts to catch the peculiar animal, but quickly realizes that wild hunting is not easy. The deer flees with agility, forcing him to use his creativity and newly discovered skills. Determined to get meat with high protein and low fat, he uses the staff to trap the deer with plants and roots. Hashira finally catches the deer, using the power of the staff to wrap it with plants and roots. He approaches the animal, offering an apology, recognizing the weight of taking a creature's life to survive. Then, he prepares for the next step, wielding an improvised knife, showing his determination to use the available resources practically and respectfully. Hashira examines the captured deer carefully, checking for signs of parasites or other issues. While he doesn't find anything visible, he decides not to eat the raw meat for safety. After preparing the organs, he deems them ready for use, demonstrating his caution and skill in handling the natural resources of the environment. Hashira finishes the evisceration of the deer, feeling relieved to have completed that step. He uses techniques he remembers from stories he heard in childhood, like leaving the meat in running water for a while to remove the blood and cool the subcutaneous fat, making it easier to remove the skin. Mentally thanking the lessons he indirectly learned, he shows a careful and practical method for dealing with game preparation in the new environment. Hashira reflects on his experience so far, realizing that his life in the new world, for now, has been more about survival than the agriculture he had imagined. He feels grateful that he didn't ignore the hunter stories from his childhood, which are now proving useful. Sitting peacefully by the water, he contemplates his new reality, wondering if he can really start living freely from that moment onward, without the pressures and routines of his previous world. The feeling of freedom begins to surface as he enjoys the moment. While appreciating the view and the peaceful moment by the water, Hashira notices the sun setting, dipping further into the horizon. He quickly realizes it's best to hurry back home before it gets dark. With that, he prepares to head back, showing his growing adaptation to the pace of life in the new world. Hashira looks at the horizon as the sun begins to set, lighting up the scene with a golden glow. He reflects on his journey, unsure of when he will reach the fulfillment he desires, but filled with hope of building a satisfying life in this new world. With renewed determination, he observes the nature around him and prepares to continue his adaptation and growth in his new home. Hashira returns home with a smile, satisfied with the progress of the day. He reflects on the resources he managed to gather, including Tohigo, Aonoko, Grave Ringo, and the green deer he's draining the blood from. The sight of his house fills him with a sense of accomplishment, marking another step in his journey of survival and life building in the new world. While Hashira heads back home, something unexpected happens, catching him by surprise. He is overwhelmed by an intense and frightening situation, expressing a mix of shock and pain. His expression shows despair and confusion, indicating that something out of the ordinary has interrupted his routine. Exhausted, Hashira lies on the ground after a failed attempt to use a stick for some purpose. He reflects on how his grandfather made the task seem so simple, but now, facing instability and inexperience, he struggles. Looking outside, he notices that time is passing quickly and that darkness is approaching. creating a sense of urgency to finish his tasks before night falls completely. Hashira tries to recall the methods of starting a fire he learned in school, but realizes he doesn't have the proper tools or detailed knowledge to replicate them accurately. He reflects on how helpful it would be to have more hands to build something efficient with the resources available in the forest. Suddenly, an intuition or unknown memory seems to emerge, guiding his movements. He begins to assemble something with wood, surprised by the origin of this unexpected knowledge, and experiments with his progress with curiosity. Hashira watches in awe as a massive being made of branches and vegetation emerges before him. The creature, imposing and incredibly large, seems to have been formed in a supernatural way, completely surprising him. He reacts in astonishment, trying to understand what's happening and where this giant natural entity came from. Still intrigued by the presence of the creature, Hashira decides to make the situation practical. He asks the giant being to help hold the base while he tries to rotate a stick and make fire. Working together, he watches with admiration as smoke begins to appear, signaling progress in his attempt to create a flame. Hashira celebrates when he finally manages to make a flame, relieved to have secured light in the face of the approaching darkness. He feels satisfied with overcoming another challenge in the new environment. However, as he looks at the giant creature illuminated by the flame, a sense of unease fills him. The imposing figure, now partially lit, seems even more intimidating under the flickering light, leaving Hashira with a mix of relief and discomfort. Hashira prepares for dinner, organizing the ingredients he gathered during the day. He examines the items carefully, identifying pink cherries resembling Sakura NBO, chestnuts, and mazol plants. He reflects on the familiarity of some of these ingredients, comparing them to items he knew from his previous world. With enthusiasm, he begins to prepare the chestnuts, remembering they are peeled and eaten like sugar cane, demonstrating his creativity in adapting past knowledge to the new environment. Hashira reflects on the lack of proper cooking tools for the vegetables he gathered. Without a pot, he decides he will have to settle for eating just the fruits for now. Upon tasting them, he realizes that, despite the simplicity, they are delicious. Inspired, he considers the idea of carving stones to improvise pots and pans, seeing this as an opportunity to test the effectiveness of his newly acquired divine tools. With a plan in mind, he begins to explore ways to improve his routine in the new world. After a day full of activities and discoveries, Hashira feels exhausted. He reflects on everything that has happened and decides to postpone the task of making pots until the next day. As an improvised solution, he uses large leaves as a substitute for a futon and prepares a comfortable place to sleep. Despite the challenges of the new environment, he shows creativity and resilience, gradually adapting to his new life. After organizing his leaves into an improvised bed, Hashira lies down and appreciates how comfortable and soft the spot turned out to be. Proud of his creativity, he smiles contently, praising his idea while relaxing. Before falling asleep, he bids his golem farewell as it goes into standby mode near the house, ensuring a safe and peaceful environment. With that, Hashira ends the day feeling a sense of accomplishment and adaptation to the new world. At dawn, Hashira wakes up, stretching while enjoying the mountainous view around his new home. He reflects on the improvised leaf bed, considering it functional, though a bit damp. Excited for the new day, he prepares to face the next tasks. Determined to continue adapting to this unknown world, Hashira gets up excited, mentally organizing his tasks for the day. He considers the need to stock up on more food, perhaps hunting more deer, and also plans to dedicate time to making pots, something useful for his survival. Determined, he heads out to start his activities, with the spirit of continuing to explore and adapt to this new life. Hashira decides to start his morning with a productive project, creating a small farm. He gathers seeds from grave ringos and pink cherries, planning to plant them to ensure a constant food source. He chooses a plot of land near the house and prepares the area, visualizing the first steps toward his self-sustaining life. With enthusiasm, he begins planting, determined to turn the space into a prosperous field. Hashira uses his divine tools to start digging the soil, preparing the ground for planting. Even though they are made of wood, the tools prove to be incredibly efficient, making the work surprisingly easy. He is impressed by their quality as he quickly makes progress, leaving the ground ready for the seeds. The sight of the transformed space gives him a sense of accomplishment and enthusiasm to keep building his new life. Hashira, noticing the golem nearby, is surprised to see it willing to help. He hands the golem a divine hoe and asks it to work on the opposite side of the field, joining forces to prepare the area for cultivation. Their collaboration results in quick and efficient progress, highlighting the usefulness of the golem as an ally in this new world. By midday, Hashira feels relieved as he observes the progress made. He acknowledges the efficiency of the golem, who worked tirelessly to prepare the ground while he only managed to complete one row. Their collaboration has resulted in a field ready for planting, but Hashira admits that he cannot match the golem's relentless vigor. Hashira begins planting, using the fruit seeds he collected, like grave ringo and pink cherries. He carefully places the seeds in the prepared soil, with the golem assisting efficiently, ensuring the work is done evenly. The field, now planted, represents an important step in building his new life in this unknown world. After planting, Hashira and the golem work together to water the seeds. Using buckets to carry water from the nearby river, they irrigate the newly planted field carefully, ensuring the soil is well moistened for the plants to grow. Their cooperation makes the process quick and efficient, preparing the field for a promising harvest in the future. Hashira decides to test the power of the blessing he received. After preparing the field with signs indicating the types of plants, he focuses his energy, remembering that fruits like apples usually require advanced knowledge and technology to grow on Earth. However, he trusts in the power of the blessing to overcome these difficulties and stimulate the growth of the seeds. Hashira watches in awe as the plants grow rapidly, thanks to the power of the blessing. He reflects on the impressive speed of growth, but realizes that continuous use of this ability might deplete the soil. Decided, he concludes that he should use the power sparingly to preserve natural resources and maintain the land's balance. Hashira takes a brief break, sitting peacefully on a rock as he observes his surroundings. The golem continues working diligently nearby. He takes a deep breath, feeling the serenity and peace of the place, enjoying the calm moment amidst the lush nature. While observing Rent working, Hashira reflects on his family and wonders how they are, but soon recognizes that, since he's dead, there's nothing he can do about it now. Although he feels like he's running away from his old life, he tries to accept his new reality. With a touch of humor, he remembers the need to eat, shifting his focus to the immediate survival needs in this new world. Hashira decides to explore the forest in search of new crops and possible prey. He calls Rent to accompany him, planning to combine gathering natural resources with hunting animals to ensure his survival and expand his self-sufficiency in this new world. Determined, he heads toward the dense vegetation, carrying his supplies and relying on Rent's help for the journey. During a break in his exploration, Hashira reflects on how strange it is to keep calling his companion Golem. He decides it's time to give the wooden friend a name. After some attempts and discarded ideas, he seriously starts considering the ideal name, trying to find one that matches the friendly and helpful spirit of Rent. Hashira finally settles on a name for the golem, calling him Rent. After suggesting the name, he notices Rent's positive reaction, as if accepting it with enthusiasm. Convinced it was a good choice, Hashira declares the name decided, solidifying the connection between them as they continue their adventure together. Hashira ends the day by greeting his newly named golem, Rent, and reflecting on the events that marked his new routine. He acknowledges the progress made, from starting the plantation to strengthening his bond with Rent, who he now considers part of his family. Accompanied by Rent, Hashira decides to gather some stones for a new project. He trusts Rent's strength to carry the materials while using the transformative power of his divine tool to mold it into a knife. Excited by the versatility of the instrument, he prepares to cut the necessary stones, demonstrating his growing mastery over the resources at his disposal. Hashira discovers the incredible efficiency of the transformed divine tool as a knife, easily cutting through the stones as though they were tofu. However, he realizes the danger of its power if not controlled properly, deciding to practice more to master its use. Meanwhile, Rent, always helpful, carries the cut stones, demonstrating their efficient collaboration. Hashira reflects on the power of divine protection and how to use it wisely in different contexts. Hashira watches in admiration as Rent effortlessly carries large stone blocks. He reflects on how indispensable Rent's help is for his tasks. While resting and planning his next steps, something seems to catch his attention, suggesting that new challenges or discoveries might be nearby. Hashira notices something high up in a tree and decides to investigate. He discovers a new plant, curious in appearance, resembling a fruit called oligo. Upon closer inspection, he notices the fruit has a tough skin and contains natural oil, which can be extracted by crushing and mixing it with water. This discovery could be useful for future resources and projects in his new life. Hashira recognizes the fruit as a version of olives in another world, which surprises him. He concludes that he can use it as an oil source and wild vegetables, an important discovery for his new life. Additionally, he identifies other useful plants around him, like yomogi, lido, yurui, and fuki. Excited by the possibilities these new crops bring, his excitement motivates him to explore further. Hashira gets creative and decides to prepare fried vegetables with the resources found in the new world, using the oil extracted from the local olives. While gathering wild vegetables with Rent's help, he reflects on the simplicity of the dish without seasonings, but recognizes the unique flavor and natural bitterness of the plants. With this, he aims to maintain a balance between what he consumes and what he cultivates, taking some seedlings for future planting. Hashira returns home after planning to expand his fields, including areas dedicated to herbs and medicinal plants. With determination, he reflects on the next steps in cultivation and uses his staff to manipulate the natural resources of the environment efficiently. Rent continues to assist him, while Hashira demonstrates his growing adaptation and strategy in the new world. Hashira builds a small shed for handling meat and organizes the space to facilitate the work. He asks Rent to help carry a deer into the shed, demonstrating his continuous effort to adapt his activities to the new environment, ensuring greater efficiency in his daily tasks. Hashira carefully positions the deer inside the shed, preparing for the next step in processing the meat. He examines the environment, checking the conditions and adjusting the animal precisely, while organizing his available tools and resources to ensure the task is done effectively. Rent, the golem, observes the process closely, ready to help if needed. Hashira finishes cutting the meat, observing the size and the challenges he faced. Even with Rent's strength, he reflects on how to improve meat storage in the future, considering building a cellar to better preserve the food. Meanwhile, he examines a leaf with preservative properties, thinking of ways to use it temporarily to keep the meat in good condition. The fire nearby burns softly, ready for its next use. Hashira plans to optimize the storage of the deer meat by instructing Rent to dig a cellar in the corner of the room to store it. Additionally, he asks Rent to prepare the necessary wood to reinforce the structure outside. While the golem works on the assigned task, Hashira takes the time to plant the seedlings he collected earlier, following a simple planting method that involves digging deep enough holes to accommodate the roots. Hashira continues the planting process carefully. First, he pours water into the planting hole and waits for it to drain. Then, he gently removes the root of the seedling without breaking it and places it in the hole. He pulls the surrounding soil around the plant's base, gently pressing with his hands to fix it in place. Finally, he generously waters the base to ensure the plant receives enough moisture to settle in. Hashira finishes the planting by using his growth-enhancing ability. He channels his magical energy into the newly planted crops, causing them to grow vigorously and healthily in a short time. The leaves glow slightly, signaling the success of his ability, while he watches with satisfaction as the plants make instant progress. While Hashira observes his newly planted field, he notices that the space is becoming cramped with the various vegetables and fruits he has cultivated, including yudo, yurui, fuki, kogomi, zenmai, and the fruits of oligo. Reflecting on the need to expand the planting area, he considers enlarging the field to better accommodate the growth of the plants and organize the cultivation more efficiently. The view of the sky in the background adds to the tranquility of the moment as he plans his next steps for his small farm. Hashira checks the progress of the cellar Rent is digging and finishing. As he approaches, he notices Rent's satisfied expression, looking proud of the work. Hashira enters to inspect and is impressed with the result, praising the effort put into the construction. The cellar is well structured and ready to be used, a crucial space to store supplies and other items that will ensure his survival. Hashira observes the reinforced structure of the cellar, praising its solidity and the cool environment, ideal for preservation. He decides to create shelves to organize the deer meat that will be brought down. Determined to finish the task quickly, Hashira hurries, as he still needs to prepare dinner. He works carefully, adjusting the details to ensure everything is ready and functional before finishing his tasks for the day. Hashira organizes the day's dinner with enthusiasm, featuring the deer meat as the main dish. He rejoices in being able to enjoy a delicious roast, even without seasonings from another world, such as salt and pepper. With simplicity, he appreciates the flavor and texture of the meat, satisfied that he can obtain basic resources in his new environment. Rent, the golem, remains in standby mode while the mealtime brings a tranquil relief after a productive day. While Hashira considers using the oligo fruits, he reflects on the process needed to extract oil, remembering known methods involving water and crushing the fruits. However, he decides to simplify and tries roasting them on a stone. Handling the fruit, he realizes that the tough skin will make it difficult to use force, even with tools like a mortar. This improvisation leads him to question whether his plan was well thought out, as he continues exploring more effective ways to handle the resources of this world. As Hashira continues his activities, he asks Rent to crush one of the oligo fruits, entrusting him with collecting the extracted oil. Meanwhile, Hashira prepares a dish of wild vegetables using a stone pot to boil the water. He notices how the heat conduction of the stone pot is limited but functional, allowing the water to boil slowly. He reflects on how this boiled water can be useful both for sterilization and for the vegetables, feeling satisfied with the progress made. While examining the wild vegetables collected, Hashira realizes that some of them need specific care before being consumed. He reflects on the needs of each one. Zenmai requires baking soda to remove bitterness, but he doesn't have the means to produce it at the moment, so he considers using charcoal as a substitute. Fuki needs to be rubbed with salt and boiled, while tohihigo, if consumed in excess, can cause digestive issues, so it should be used in moderation. Deciding on the sides for the meal, he chooses to prepare aenoko and a small portion of tohihigo, harvested on the first day. Rent continues to help with the preparation, completing his task with strength and efficiency. As Rent uses his strength to assist Hashira, he delivers the extracted oil and receives thanks for his efficiency. Although there are still pieces of skin in the oil, Hashira considers this acceptable for the moment. He instructs Rent to remove the vegetables from the boiling water, rinse them in cold water, and then squeeze them. With everything ready, he prepares to grill the main deer meat. He pours the oil over a heated stone, creating the perfect cooking surface, and begins grilling the meat with precision. The meal is nearly finished. Hashira completes the grilling of the deer meat with oligo oil, carefully adjusting the heat to achieve the perfect cook. The sound of the meat grilling fills the air, creating a pleasant and welcoming atmosphere. With the dish ready, he presents a meal consisting of grilled deer meat and sides of aenoko and tohihigo, arranged thoughtfully. His satisfaction with the result is evident as he watches his creation, eager to savor the meal. The protagonist prepares for the meal. Thanking before beginning to eat, he observes Rent, who cannot consume food but seems concerned about offering something symbolic, like water. He reflects on the peculiarity of Rent, made of wood, absorbing water, and perhaps depending on sunlight, creating a sense of sharing a meal, even if in a different way. The protagonist begins his meal with the wild vegetables he prepared. He appreciates the crisp texture of the dish and notes the balance between the delicate sweetness and the slight bitterness of the ingredients, reflecting on the unique taste and the possibility of combining them with other experiences in the future. The meal symbolizes his adaptation to the environment and the fruits of his effort in an unknown world. The protagonist then prepares for the main dish, the venison. He observes the use of the divine tool as a substitute for cutlery, apologizing for the lack of proper utensils while attempting to wash the meat. In the end, he feels a mix of excitement and concern about the taste of the meat, eager to see how the dish will turn out. Reflecting on his experiences and his adaptation to the new world, the protagonist expresses his pleasure with the meat, exclaiming how tender it is. Although satisfied with the taste, he worries about the fresh scent and the slight bitterness of the oil, planning to do more research on how to improve the oil extraction for a more refined flavor. He also comments on the smooth and delicious flavor of the meat, reflecting on his discoveries and adaptation to the new world. The protagonist reflects on how much closer he feels to the life of survival and camping, rather than traditional agricultural life. He also wonders if he will end up missing the robust taste of venison and the foods he is discovering. At the end of the day, he describes the events of the day, which include the discovery of oligo oil, planting wild vegetables, and his first culinary experience. The protagonist prepares to extend a tree branch using a tool, commanding it to work, feeling a certain expectation. When he begins using it, the branch extends dramatically, causing the protagonist to be surprised by the speed and strength of the process. As he expresses mild shock, he observes the effect in surprise, demonstrating that he didn't expect such power in the tool. The protagonist tries to balance while using the tool to move the branch, but loses his balance and falls to the ground, expressing frustration. He thinks it would be easier if Rent, the golem, was there to help him balance and imagines that if he got the hang of using the tool, he could move more easily. However, he decides to try again at another opportunity. The protagonist observes his plants, which are growing healthily, and reflects on how collecting them takes time. But since they're a type of plant, he can handle it with ease. He also mentions how removing weeds is a simple task. The protagonist reflects on the incredible growth of his plants, which, despite fruits usually taking longer to grow, have developed quickly due to the blessing. After a few days, he harvests and tastes the cultivated vegetables, discovering that the products he grew are far tastier than the wild ones. He appreciates the quality of his crops and feels satisfied with the result. The protagonist, after reflecting on the fruits he's cultivating, gets excited about the future of the farm. He wonders if the fruits are some sort of effect of the blessing he received, but soon gets excited about the idea of expanding his plantation. With his motivation at its peak, he decides to give his all to expand the farm before noon. The protagonist reflects on the difficulty of working alone on the farm. Considering that agricultural work is more challenging than before, he feels that the blessing helps with his work, but still decides to take a break to check on other things. In the meantime, he notices a pleasant smell in the air, which distracts him from the task for a moment. The protagonist thanks Rent for taking care of everything while he was busy. He then observes with surprise that the meat that was being smoked is perfectly ready. There's a sense of satisfaction seeing the result of the work, and he reflects on how well it turned out, though wondering if it was the right way to do it. The protagonist ponders the process of smoking the meat, though he's unsure how long it will last. He considers that, although he won't be able to consume all the smoked meat the next day, he can't avoid using seasonings to enhance the flavor. He decides to look for a solution to handle the seasoning and how to continue the process of preserving the meat. The protagonist feels nostalgic for the taste of the sea and worries about the lack of salt and herbs for seasoning. He asks Rent to grab a basket and, in the meantime, plans to explore the nearby area before the sun sets, avoiding straying too far. The protagonist notices there are many weeds around, which might mean the place isn't ideal for gathering. However, he realizes that among the weeds, there are some with medicinal properties, like Otacaracusa, which helps reduce bleeding and swelling, and Shake, which relieves muscle tension, stomachaches, and diarrhea. He also notices the presence of Handinin, whose roots have antibacterial properties and can be used in medicines. The protagonist thinks about preparing a field dedicated to medicinal herbs, taking advantage of the blessing he received to learn how to mix them correctly. While working, he senses a peculiar smell and, upon investigating, finds a plant that surprises him. He wonders if that smell could belong to a special herb, intrigued by the discovery. Upon finding a plant called Hautynia, the protagonist becomes emotional and remembers his childhood in the countryside, where he used to see it everywhere. He even recalls how his grandmother used to steep it with hot water. Feeling nostalgic, He rejoices in having found the plant in another world, remembering his grandmother's memories. The protagonist decides to transplant some of the Hautainia plants to the field, as in a life like his, he might need them later. Although he hasn't found other herbs, he feels grateful for having gone after the plant and prepares to return later to harvest whatever is necessary. The protagonist finds a fruit with a strange skin, resembling a bud, and is surprised to discover that it's similar to a staple food for bread, known as machimo kai. He's delighted to realize that this fruit can be eaten as a substitute for rice or wheat, relieving the need for these foods for a time. The protagonist tries the fruit, comparing its texture to machai, but notices it isn't as elastic. After tasting it, he's surprised to find that, despite being raw, it has a mild, sweet flavor, similar to rice flour bread. He seems very pleased with the discovery. The protagonist thinks of new ways to prepare the machai fruit and plans to mix it with mugwort, a type of herb, or even bake it. He decides to collect more fruits to plant in a new area of the farm. Excited by the idea and looking forward to what the next day will bring, he also thinks about serving the fruit with the smoked venison he prepared earlier. The protagonist smells an unpleasant odor and starts to wonder if it's his own body odor, since he has been working hard on the farm and hasn't been able to take a proper bath. He explains that, although he washes himself before bed, the improvised method with a sponge made from dried gourd isn't enough. He then begins to reflect on how much he really wants to take a proper bath. The protagonist decides to go to the lake to take a bath, inviting Rent to join him. Rent, the golem, seems confused by the idea, but the protagonist is clearly excited about the opportunity to finally clean himself properly. The scene takes place near the lake, with a calm view of the mountains in the background. The protagonist, thrilled at the idea of taking a relaxing bath, begins to build an improvised tub. He decides that the size of the tub will be sufficient for him to relax and stretch out. He asks Rent, the golem, to fill the tub with water up to about 70% of its capacity. Rent obeys, though seems a bit confused by the instructions. The protagonist, determined to be more self-sufficient, tries to start a fire on his own, not wanting to rely on Rent for everything. He prepares the materials and presses the ignition device. When smoke begins to appear, he gets ready to push hard. After finally managing to light the fire by himself, the protagonist starts heating stones until they reach the right temperature. He prepares to place the stones in the bath he's preparing. The protagonist sets up the bath, and once it's done, he begins pouring the hot water over himself. However, he feels the excessive heat and quickly jumps into the bath. The protagonist enjoys the bath, feeling relaxed and happy. He reflects on how invigorating it is, saying that the water really cleanses life. The protagonist and his wooden companion sit in a bathing tub placed by a lake, with a vast, serene landscape of water and distant mountains stretching into the horizon. The calm water glimmers under the daylight, emphasizing the tranquility of the moment. As the protagonist enjoys the warm bath, he reflects on maintaining hygiene and easing fatigue in his daily routine. He leans on the tub's edge, gazing at the expansive view around him, which enhances the peacefulness of the open-air bath. The scene conveys a sense of relaxation and appreciation for the natural surroundings. The protagonist, standing in the bath, addresses his wooden companion, who appears to observe the situation with curiosity. Gesturing towards the tub, the protagonist offers to share the bathing experience. He prepares to assist by pouring water over the companion as part of the bathing custom. The protagonist steps out of the tub, demonstrating how to clean oneself by pouring water to remove dirt before entering. He takes the wooden companion's participation seriously, showing proper manners and care as he prepares for their turn to experience the bath. The wooden companion, now sitting inside the bath, exudes a sense of relaxation, with water gently steaming around it. The protagonist observes with satisfaction as his companion enjoys the bath, showing signs of comfort. Standing nearby, the protagonist holds a towel and appears pleased with the success of their shared experience. A small fire burns close to the tub, adding warmth and atmosphere to the moment. After finishing his bath, the protagonist considers trying a nearby waterfall for a refreshing experience the next day. Appreciating the promising scenery, he pours water to rinse himself off, adding to his feeling of refreshment. Meanwhile, he notices Rent wandering nearby and calls out to him, signaling that it's time to return. Curious, he asks if Rent found anything of interest as the wooden companion stands still, holding a bucket. As the evening light filters through the trees, the protagonist notices a figure lying motionless near the base of a tree. As he approaches, he observes a young woman with distinctly long ears, causing him to pause and consider her identity. Reflecting on what the goddess mentioned about this world being inhabited by various races, he wonders if she could be an elf. Kneeling beside her, he examines her condition carefully, noting her unusual features against the serene natural backdrop. The protagonist examines the girl more closely and notices that she is injured. Concerned, he assesses the situation and determines that her wounds are beyond what his basic medical supplies can handle. Realizing the urgency, he resolves to retrieve higher quality medicine from his home to tend to her injuries. His determination intensifies as he prepares to act swiftly. The protagonist carefully lifts the injured girl. Noting her fragile state, he entrusts her to Rent, instructing him to handle her gently due to her condition. His expression turns resolute as he declares the need to act immediately, showcasing the skills and preparations he has honed for moments like this. The protagonist takes decisive action, securing himself and the injured girl onto the makeshift wooden transport. Rent grabs onto a vine as instructed, preparing for departure. With a firm grip and a determined expression, the protagonist launches the group into motion, propelling them forward at high speed through the air on their improvised ride.